My name is Mary Wilson, a 34-year-old biomedical engineer who created a revolutionary diabetes monitoring device. After 8 years of pouring my heart and soul into Huntington Biomedical, I was fired today by the CEO's arrogant nephew who called my paycheck a courtesy. What he didn't realize was that I'd negotiated a special contract clause years ago. He just triggered a 24-hour countdown that would shock the entire company to its core. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing up to workplace injustice. Trust me, you'll want to see how this all unfolds. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where my father worked as a high school science teacher and my mother as a nurse. From an early age, they instilled in me a deep curiosity about how things worked and a desire to help others. I was always taking apart household appliances and putting them back together, sometimes even improving them. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were rich in wisdom and encouragement. When I showed an aptitude for science, they pushed me to apply for every scholarship and grant available. Thanks to their support and my determination, I got a full ride to Ohio State for my undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering. Those 4 years flew by, and I graduated at the top of my class, which earned me another scholarship to MIT for my graduate studies. It was at MIT that my life changed forever. During my first semester, I was assigned to work with Dr. Stephanie Chen, a brilliant researcher known for her groundbreaking work in medical devices. Unlike some professors who treated graduate students as free labor, Dr. Chen saw me as a collaborator. She became more than a mentor. She became the big sister I never had. One night after working late in the lab, Dr. Chen and I were sharing a pizza when she revealed something personal. My sister was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 8, she told me. Every day I watched her prick her fingers until they were calloused and bruised. I always thought there had to be a better way. That conversation sparked an idea. What if we could develop a non-invasive glucose monitoring system, something that wouldn't require constant finger pricks, something that could continuously track blood glucose levels without pain or inconvenience? For the next 2 years, Dr. Chen and I worked tirelessly on this concept. We created prototype after prototype, refining our design each time. By the time I completed my PhD, we had developed a promising proof of concept, a small wearable device that could accurately measure glucose levels through the skin, using a combination of near-infrared spectroscopy and a proprietary algorithm I had developed. Our research caught the attention of Harold Huntington, founder and CEO of Huntington Biomedical, a mid-sized but rapidly growing medical device company. He flew to Boston personally to meet with us, and I'll never forget our first meeting. "Young lady," he said, his eyes twinkling with excitement after reviewing our data, "you might have just revolutionized diabetes care. I want you on my team." The offer was generous, a substantial salary, state-of-the-art lab facilities, and a talented team to help bring our device to market. But most importantly, Harold offered something that other companies didn't: my name on the patents alongside Huntington Biomedical. Before signing, I consulted with Amanda Davis, my college roommate who had gone on to become a corporate attorney. She reviewed the contract and suggested an additional clause. "Mary," she said, "you're bringing tremendous value to this company. You should protect yourself in case things don't work out." She proposed a reversion clause. If I was ever terminated without cause, any patents I developed would revert to me exclusively after 24 hours. When I brought this to Harold, he didn't hesitate. "I have no intention of ever letting you go, Dr. Wilson. You're the future of this company. If it makes you feel secure, I'm happy to include it." Those early years at Huntington Biomedical were exhilarating. Harold was a hands-on leader who fostered innovation and respected expertise. He would often stop by my lab just to see what I was working on and offer encouragement. The company was growing rapidly, and our glucose monitoring device was advancing through development and early clinical trials with promising results. But around my 4th year, things began to change. Harold's brother Richard Huntington joined the company as chief operating officer. Unlike Harold, who had built the company through scientific innovation, Richard came from a purely business background. He brought with him his son James Huntington III, fresh out of business school with an MBA, but zero scientific knowledge. At first, I didn't pay much attention to the corporate reshuffling. I was too focused on perfecting our technology. But gradually, I noticed a shift in company culture. Decisions that were once based on scientific merit were increasingly influenced by cost-cutting measures and marketing considerations. Meetings that used to be collaborative became formal and hierarchical. Despite these changes, I continued to make significant advancements with our device. The clinical trials were showing exceptional accuracy rates, and patients in our study groups were reporting life-changing improvements in their diabetes management. Our product had the potential to help millions of people worldwide and generate billions in revenue over its lifetime. But as the project neared completion, I began to be gradually sidelined. James Huntington, who had somehow been promoted to vice president of product development, despite his lack of technical expertise, started taking more control over my project. He would schedule meetings about my work without inviting me, then question my decisions afterward based on his limited understanding. I tried to speak with Harold about these issues, but he was increasingly absent, focusing on new acquisitions and expansion plans. The company that had once felt like a second home was becoming an uncomfortable place to work. Still, I persevered, determined to see my innovation reach the people who needed it. As our glucose monitoring device moved from development into final testing phases, I found myself working 16-hour days. The technology was revolutionary, a small patch worn on the upper arm that continuously monitored glucose levels through the skin and transmitted data to a smartphone app. No more finger pricks, no more blood samples, just continuous, reliable data that could even predict dangerous highs and lows before they happened. During this intensive period, I leaned heavily on my friendship with Amanda Davis. Though she worked at a law firm across town, we made time for weekly dinners where I could vent my frustrations. "They're excluding me from marketing meetings about my own product," I told her one evening over pasta. "James keeps referring to it as our breakthrough technology in company emails as if he had anything to do with its development." Amanda looked concerned. "Have you checked your contract recently? Make sure they're not trying to quietly change anything about your patent arrangements." Her words proved prophetic. The next day, I noticed James lingering near my office with the company's IP lawyer. When they saw me, they quickly dispersed, but not before I glimpsed them reviewing a document with my name on it. Around this time, I received devastating news. Dr. Stephanie Chen, who had continued her research at MIT after I left, had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She called me personally to break the news. "I don't have much time left, Mary," she said, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "But I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished. You're taking our idea further than I ever could have." I immediately requested time off to visit her, but my request was delayed in HR for review. When I finally received approval, it came with a note saying my presence would be required for an upcoming board presentation, giving me just 2 days with Stephanie instead of the week I'd asked for. During those 2 precious days, Stephanie shared something disturbing. "A lawyer from Huntington contacted me last month," she told me. "They were asking unusual questions about our early research, trying to establish that the initial concept came from the company rather than our work at MIT. This revelation sent a chill down my spine. Why would they need to re-establish the origins of our research unless they were trying to challenge the patent arrangements?" Back at work, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Our product, now named Glucosync, was 6 months from launch with projected first-year revenue of $350 million. Industry analysts were calling it a potential game-changer in diabetes care. As the creator, I should have been front and center in the pre-launch activities. Instead, I found myself being methodically sidelined. My name disappeared from email chains discussing Glucosync. Meeting invites arrived after the meetings had already started. When I did attend, James would interrupt me or dismiss my input with phrases like, "We need to focus on business perspectives now, not technical details." Dr. Robert Miller, a senior researcher who had been with the company almost as long as I had, pulled me aside after one particularly frustrating meeting. "Something's not right, Mary," he whispered. "I overheard Richard and James discussing restructuring your department after the product launch. Be careful." That evening, I discovered that my lab access had been restricted. My keycard no longer opened certain doors, and I had to request permission to access some of the test data for Glucosync. When I inquired about this with IT, they told me the directive had come from the executive floor. The final alarm bell came when I discovered a draft press release about Glucosync on the company server. It mentioned James Huntington as the development lead and referred to me only in passing as part of the talented research team. Our revolutionary product, the culmination of my life's work, was being co-opted before my eyes. I scheduled an urgent meeting with Harold, but his assistant informed me he was traveling in Europe for the next 2 weeks. I tried emailing him directly only to receive an automatic reply directing all product inquiries to James or Richard. That night I could barely sleep. I pulled out my contract and reviewed the reversion clause Amanda had insisted upon years ago. The language was clear: if terminated without cause, all patents I had developed would revert to me exclusively after 24 hours unless a settlement was reached. At the time, it had seemed like an unlikely precaution. Now it felt like my only protection. The next morning I arrived early to back up all my research notes and personal files. Something told me I might not have access to them much longer. As I was finishing, I overheard James in the hallway outside my office. "It's all arranged," he was saying to someone. "HR is prepared for tomorrow. Once she's out, we can move forward with the launch as planned." My heart raced. They were planning to fire me just months before the product launch. After 8 years of dedication, they were going to push me out and take credit for my work. The betrayal cut deep, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had prepared for this possibility, even if I'd never truly believed it would come to pass. That evening I called Amanda and told her everything. "Be ready," she advised. "If they do fire you tomorrow, say as little as possible. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything. Let the reversion clause do its work." I barely slept that night, rehearsing in my mind how I would handle the next day with dignity despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. The morning of my firing began like any other day. I dressed carefully in my favorite navy blue suit, the one I had worn to my first meeting with Harold Huntington years ago. Something told me to armor myself with professionalism for whatever was coming. As I drove to the office, the rising sun cast a golden glow over the Huntington Biomedical building, its glass facade gleaming like a beacon. For 8 years I had arrived at this building filled with purpose and passion. Today a sense of foreboding weighed heavy in my chest. The tension in the office was palpable from the moment I stepped off the elevator. Colleagues avoided eye contact, conversations hushed as I passed. My assistant Lisa looked up with red-rimmed eyes when I entered my office. "Sarah from HR called," she said quietly. "There's a meeting in conference room A at 9:30. She said it's mandatory." I nodded, setting down my bag. "Thank you, Lisa, for everything." The genuine confusion on her face told me she didn't know what was coming. At least not all of it. I spent the next hour organizing my personal items and downloading copies of my research journals, careful to include only what belonged to me personally. At precisely 9:25, I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and walked to conference room A with my head held high. James and Richard Huntington were already seated at the table, along with Sarah Johnson from HR. Sarah's normally friendly face was carefully blank, her folder placed precisely in front of her. James was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my entrance. Richard at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mary, please have a seat." Sarah began, her voice professionally detached. "We've called this meeting to discuss some organizational changes at Huntington Biomedical. Let's not waste time with corporate speak." James interrupted, finally putting down his phone. He leaned forward, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "The company is moving in a different direction and your position is being eliminated." "My position as lead developer of Glucosync?" I asked calmly, though my heart was pounding. "Your department is being restructured." Richard interjected smoothly. "We appreciate your contributions, but as we move toward commercialization, we need different leadership skills." "Marketing skills, you mean?" I said. "Not scientific expertise." James's smirk grew wider. "The hard science is done. Now we need people who understand business, not just lab rats who got lucky with a good idea." Sarah flinched at his words but remained silent. James, Richard warned, but his son was on a roll. "Let's be honest here," James continued, leaning back in his chair with casual arrogance. "Your paycheck is a courtesy, and my courtesy just expired." The room fell silent. Sarah stared down at her folder. Richard closed his eyes briefly as if pained by his son's tactlessness. I felt a surge of emotions: shock, betrayal, anger, grief. 8 years of my life, countless hours of research and development, a technology that would help millions, all reduced to a courtesy. But beneath the turmoil, a strange calm settled over me. They had just made a catastrophic mistake and they didn't even know it. I see, I said simply. May I ask if Harold is aware of this decision? A flicker of unease crossed Richard's face. My brother has delegated operational decisions to management. This is a management decision. In that moment, I knew Harold was being kept in the dark. This was a power play by Richard and James, timed while the founder was distracted with expansion efforts. Sarah slid a folder toward me. This contains your separation agreement. We're offering 6 months severance, which is generous, considering company policy is only 3 months. In exchange, we ask that you sign these non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. I didn't touch the folder. I'll need time to review these with my attorney. The severance offer expires in 48 hours, Richard said firmly. We need this wrapped up quickly. Little did they know, 48 hours was more than enough time for my reversion clause to take effect. Is there anything else? I asked, my voice steady. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings, James said clearly, enjoying this display of power. Your access has already been revoked and company property, including your laptop and phone, will need to be surrendered immediately. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Then I believe we're done here. As I turned to leave, Richard called after me. Mary, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's just business. I paused at the door. I understand perfectly, Richard. It's just business. The security guard waiting outside looked apologetic as he escorted me back to my office. As we walked through the research, department colleagues watched with shocked expressions. Some had tears in their eyes. I kept my head high, refusing to give James and Richard the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. In my office, I quickly gathered the few personal items I hadn't already secured. Family photos, a few books, the award plaque from the American Medical Devices Association. The security guard stood awkwardly by the door, clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. I'm sorry about this, Dr. Wilson, he said quietly. It's not right what they're doing. I gave him a small smile. Thank you, Bill. Take care of yourself. Before leaving, I took one last look at my lab through the glass partition. The prototype Glucosync devices lined up on the workbench. The whiteboards covered with my handwriting and calculations. The team I had built now looking lost and confused as they watched me go. 8 years of my life. My greatest professional achievement. And now I was being marched out like a criminal. At the front entrance, I surrendered my badge to the security desk. Without a backward glance, I walked through the doors and into the bright morning sunlight. Only when I reached my car did I allow myself a moment of emotion, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I started the engine and drove away from Huntington Biomedical. The 24-hour countdown had begun. The drive home passed in a blur. Traffic lights changed. Cars moved around me, but I was operating on autopilot, my mind racing through the implications of what had just happened. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my shock had begun to crystallize into something else, resolve. Inside my house, I kicked off my heels and immediately called Amanda. They did it, I said when she answered. James fired me, called my paycheck a courtesy that had expired. Those arrogant idiots, Amanda replied. Are you okay? No, I admitted, my voice finally breaking. 8 years, Amanda. 8 years of my life, and they think they can just push me out and take everything. But they can't, she said firmly. Your contract is clear. Did you sign anything? No. They offered 6 months severance in exchange for signing away my rights, but I didn't touch it. Good. Now listen carefully. The 24-hour countdown has started. We need to be prepared for what comes next. Amanda explained that Huntington Biomedical would likely realize their mistake soon. When they did, they would throw everything at me. Threats, bribes, perhaps even attempts to discredit me professionally. We needed to be ready. Review your contract again, she instructed. Make sure we haven't missed anything. I'll clear my schedule and come over. We need to prepare for tomorrow. After hanging up, I changed into comfortable clothes and spread my contract documents across the dining table. The reversion clause was clear. In the event of termination without cause, all patents developed by the employee during their tenure shall revert exclusively to the employee after 24 hours, unless a mutually agreeable settlement is reached. I had insisted on this clause not out of greed or suspicion, but because the technology was my life's work. It was never about the money. It was about ensuring that my innovation would reach the people who needed it the way I had envisioned it. Around noon, my phone began ringing with calls from Huntington Biomedical, first HR, then legal, then Richard himself. I let them all go to voicemail, following Amanda's advice to avoid any conversation that might be used against me later. The voicemails grew increasingly urgent. Mary, this is Sarah from HR. There's been a misunderstanding. Could you please call me back as soon as possible? Dr. Wilson, this is Thomas Green from legal. We need to discuss some aspects of your separation agreement. It's quite urgent. Mary, Richard Huntington here. I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning. James spoke out of turn. Let's meet to discuss a more appropriate transition. I listened to each message, noting the rising panic in their voices. They had clearly discovered the reversion clause and realized the gravity of their mistake. Amanda arrived at 2 o'clock with takeout food and a determined expression. Eat, she commanded. You need your strength. As we reviewed my options, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Thomas Green, the company's lead attorney, standing on my porch with a thick envelope. Don't open the door, Amanda advised. Let me handle this. She spoke through the door. Mr. Green, I'm Amanda Davis, Dr. Wilson's attorney. Any communications should go through me. Miss Davis Green responded, his voice strained but professional. Huntington Biomedical would like to offer Dr. Wilson a revised separation package. The company recognizes her valuable contributions and wishes to make amends for this morning's unfortunate interaction. You can leave any documents in the mailbox, Amanda replied. We'll review them and respond appropriately. After Green left, we examined his offering a new contract with a $2 million severance package and the title of founding scientist on all Glucosync materials. But the fine print required me to waive the reversion clause. They're desperate, Amanda observed. But this is just the opening move. As evening approached, the stakes escalated. Richard Huntington himself called repeatedly. When I continued to ignore his calls, a text message arrived. $5 million. Plus royalties. Please call me. Amanda and I discussed our strategy over dinner. The money was tempting, especially considering I was now unemployed. But this wasn't just about compensation. They fired you without cause after 8 years of dedicated work, Amanda reminded me. Then they insulted you and tried to take credit for your innovation. Do you trust them to honor any new agreement? I didn't. Not anymore. At 8 o'clock, another knock at the door. This time it was Richard Huntington himself, holding a check in a leather folder. Amanda opened the door but blocked the entrance. Mr. Huntington, this is inappropriate. Please, Richard said, his earlier arrogance replaced by barely concealed panic. Just 5 minutes with Mary. Against Amanda's advice, I came to the door. I wanted to face the man who had allowed his son to humiliate me. $10 million, Richard said without preamble, opening the folder to reveal a cashier's check. Right now. Plus ongoing royalties and a consulting position. Just don't trigger the reversion. I studied his face, seeing not remorse but fear. Not concern for me or for the patients who needed Glucosync, but for his company's bottom line and his family's control. Why isn't Harold here? I asked. Richard's expression tightened. My brother is handling other aspects of the business. This is my department. So he still doesn't know, I concluded. This is a very generous offer, Mary. Richard continued, ignoring my observation. More than generous. It would be foolish to turn it down. I closed the door without another word. Throughout the night, the offers continued to escalate, reaching $20 million by midnight. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but rest wouldn't come. I kept thinking about Stephanie Chen, about our original vision for Glucosync, about the patients in clinical trials whose lives had been transformed by the technology. By dawn, I had made my decision. This wasn't about money. It was about integrity and ensuring that Glucosync would help as many people as possible without being compromised by corporate greed or tainted by the Huntington's ethical bankruptcy. At 8:15, exactly 24 hours after my termination meeting, Amanda and I got into her car and drove to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It was time to formalize the reversion of my patents. The United States Patent and Trademark Office was already bustling when Amanda and I arrived at 9 o'clock. We had made an appointment with a patent examiner to file the paperwork for the reversion, and I carried a thick folder containing all the necessary documentation. As we approached the entrance, I spotted a familiar group in the lobby: Thomas Green and 2 other Huntington biomedical lawyers huddled together, clearly waiting for us. They must have anticipated this move. "Just keep walking," Amanda murmured. "Don't engage unless necessary." We were halfway across the lobby when Green noticed us and rushed over his colleagues close behind. "Dr. Wilson," he called, his voice echoing in the marble space. "Please, we need to talk before you do anything rash." Amanda stepped between us. "Mr. Green, as I told you yesterday, any communication should go through me. My client has no interest in further discussions at this time." "The company is prepared to offer $30 million, Green said urgently, "plus a fully funded research institute under Dr. Wilson's direction. Complete autonomy." The amount made me pause briefly. $30 million could fund my own research for years, help my parents retire comfortably, support causes I believed in. But the desperate look in Green's eyes told me everything I needed to know. The patents were worth far more to Huntington Biomedical. "We have an appointment to keep," I replied, continuing toward the elevators. As the doors were about to close, Richard Huntington himself burst through the main entrance, red-faced and breathless. He sprinted toward us, shouting, "Mary, wait!" The elevator doors closed before he reached us, but I knew this confrontation was just beginning. On the 4th floor, we were escorted to a small conference room where a patent examiner was waiting with the necessary forms. We had just started reviewing the documentation when a commotion outside the door announced Richard's arrival. The door burst open, and Richard stormed in, followed by a flustered security guard. "Sir, you can't just barge in," the guard began. "It's all right," I told the guard. "I know him." Richard's normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his tie askew, and forehead beaded with sweat. "Mary, you can't do this. You'll destroy everything we've built." "Everything I've built, you mean," I corrected him quietly. $50 million, he said, his voice lowered but intense. $50 million right now. Just name your terms. The patent examiner looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should give you some privacy." "No," I said firmly. "We're here on official business. Mr. Huntington can wait outside if he wishes to speak with me afterward." Richard's face darkened. "You don't understand what you're doing. This isn't just about money. There are contracts with distributors, manufacturing arrangements, marketing campaigns already in motion. Thousands of jobs are at stake." "I understand exactly what I'm doing," I replied. "I'm protecting my life's work from people who didn't value it or me appropriately." "This is absurd." Richard snapped, his desperation giving way to anger. "You're being emotional. Vindictive." Amanda stood up. "Mr. Huntington, that's enough. Either wait outside respectfully, or I'll ask security to remove you." The standoff was interrupted by another commotion in the hallway. Through the glass partition, I saw James arguing with security. But behind him was a figure I hadn't expected to see: Harold Huntington himself, looking grave and confused. The door opened again, and Harold entered, followed by a protesting James. "What the hell is going on here?" Harold demanded, looking between his brother and me. For a moment, the room was silent. Harold Huntington, now in his 70s, had been my mentor and champion for years before gradually becoming distant as the company expanded. Seeing him now, I realized how much older he looked than when I'd first met him. "Ask your brother," I said, "or your nephew." Harold turned to Richard, who suddenly seemed unable to meet his gaze. "Richard," I got a frantic call from James, saying something about Mary leaving and patents reverting. "What have you done?" Richard cleared his throat. "We made a necessary business decision. Mary's role was becoming redundant as we moved toward commercialization. We offered her a very generous severance package. After you fired me without cause," I added, "and after your son told me my paycheck was a courtesy that had expired." Harold's expression darkened. "You did what?" James stepped forward, his earlier arrogance somewhat diminished in his uncle's presence. "Uncle Harold, she's exaggerating. We simply restructured her department. She's being vindictive by threatening the Glucosync patents." I'm not threatening anything, I said calmly. I'm exercising a clause in my contract that your father and uncle agreed to 8 years ago. A clause that gives me full ownership of my patents if I'm terminated without cause. Harold stared at me, then at Richard. Is this true? You fired Mary, without consulting me, and now the Glucosync patents are reverting to her. Richard's composure finally cracked. Harold, I was handling an internal matter. James may have been somewhat tactless in his approach, but tactless, Harold interrupted, his voice rising. You allowed my nephew to fire the most valuable scientist in our company without cause, the woman whose innovation is projected to be worth billions over its lifetime. Harold turned to James. And you? What were you thinking? Your paycheck is a courtesy to the person who created our most important product. James paled under his uncle's scrutiny. I was following Dad's directive to restructure the department. We needed someone with better business acumen leading the Glucosync launch and… Better business acumen, Harold repeated incredulously. You were going to replace a brilliant scientist with what, an MBA who doesn't understand the technology? Did either of you think this through at all? The room fell silent. The patent examiner cleared his throat awkwardly. Harold turned back to me, his anger fading into something that looked like genuine regret. Mary, I had no idea about any of this. No idea at all. For a moment I glimpsed the Harold Huntington I had once admired, the innovator, the ethical businessman, the mentor who valued scientific integrity. I believe you, I said softly, but it doesn't change what happened. Harold nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. He straightened his shoulders and addressed me formally. Dr. Wilson, would you be willing to discuss alternatives? Not here, not under duress, but in a proper setting with appropriate legal representation for both sides. Before I could answer, James interjected. Uncle Harold, we can't let her take the patents. I've already begun briefing the board on the product launch strategy. My promotion to executive vice president depends on… Your promotion. Harold cut him off, his voice dangerously quiet. You engineered this situation to secure a promotion. Richard put a hand on his son's shoulder, silencing him. Harold, we can discuss family matters later. Right now, we need to focus on saving the company from disaster. Harold looked between his brother and nephew, then back to me. I saw the moment when the full picture became clear to him. His family had betrayed not just me but him as well, undermining the company he had built through decades of ethical leadership. Mary, Harold said quietly. What do you want? It was the first time anyone from Huntington Biomedical had asked me that question since this ordeal began. I took a deep breath. I want what I've always wanted for Glucosync to reach the people who need it, for my work to be recognized, and for the people I work with to value integrity as much as profit. Harold nodded. Those are reasonable desires. He turned to the patent examiner. Sir, could you give us a few minutes? I promise we won't take much of your time. The examiner nodded and stepped outside, leaving us in a tense silence. Harold took a seat across from me. Mary, I'm asking you as someone who once trusted me to give me 48 hours to make this right. Not to block your patent reversion, but to explore whether there might be a solution that serves both your interests and the patients waiting for this technology. I looked at Amanda, who gave a slight nod. 48 hours, I agreed. But the reversion paperwork gets filed today. Any agreement we reach will be based on me having full control of the patents. Richard started to protest, but Harold silenced him with a raised hand. Agreed. The company will bear all costs associated with any new arrangement. And Mary, you have my word that regardless of the outcome, there will be accountability for how you were treated. As we left the patent office, the reversion paperwork officially filed, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. This wasn't how I had imagined my journey with Huntington Biomedical would end. But perhaps it wasn't an ending at all, but the beginning of something new, something better. The immediate aftermath of my patent reversion sent shockwaves through Huntington Biomedical. By the afternoon, news had leaked to industry insiders, and by the next morning the company's stock had dropped 15%. Business news outlets ran headlines like, Patent dispute threatens revolutionary diabetes device, and Huntington Biomedical faces crisis, as key patents revert to former scientist. I stayed away from the media frenzy, focusing instead on my next steps. With the patents now legally mine, I had leverage but also responsibility. Millions of diabetes patients were waiting for Glucosync, and I couldn't let corporate politics delay its release. My first priority was visiting Stephanie Chen at Massachusetts General Hospital. When I entered her room, I was shocked by how frail she looked, her once vibrant presence diminished by her battle with cancer. Yet her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Mary," she said, her voice weak but warm, "I've been reading about you. Quite the corporate drama you've stirred up." I sat beside her bed and told her everything from James's cruel dismissal to Harold's eventual intervention. She listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. "So what will you do now?" she asked when I had finished. "You hold all the cards." "That's why I'm here," I admitted. "I need your advice. I want Glucosync to reach patients as quickly as possible, but I don't trust the Huntingtons anymore, at least not Richard and James." Stephanie thought for a moment. "You need your own company," she said decisively. "One built on the values that matter to you. The technology is too important to be controlled by people who don't share your vision. Start a company. I'm a scientist, not a CEO." "So was I," she reminded me. "But before cancer, I was planning to launch my own medical device startup. I've done the research, made the connections. I can help you, Mary." Over the next 2 days, Stephanie became my guide to the business side of medical innovation. From her hospital bed, she introduced me via video calls to key industry contacts, potential investors, regulatory experts, manufacturing specialists. Her reputation opened doors that would have otherwise remained closed to me. One of these contacts was Michael Bennett, a venture capitalist known for funding medical startups with strong ethical foundations. When Stephanie arranged a meeting, I expected a brief courtesy call. Instead, Bennett arrived with his entire team and a detailed proposal. "Dr. Wilson," he said after our introductions, "I've been following your work for years. The glucose monitoring technology you've developed could transform diabetes care globally. We want to help you build a company worthy of that innovation." Bennett's offer was straightforward: $20 million in initial funding for a controlling stake in my new company, with additional funding rounds planned as we approached product launch. The catch: I would need to serve as chief science officer rather than CEO, with an experienced executive brought in to handle business operations. "We need you focused on what you do best," Bennett explained. "The science, the innovation, the vision. Let someone else worry about balance sheets and marketing strategies." It was a tempting offer, but something didn't feel right. After years of having my authority undermined at Huntington Biomedical, I was reluctant to cede control again, even partially. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Harold Huntington calling exactly 48 hours after our agreement at the patent office. "Mary," he said when I answered, "I've spent the past 2 days restructuring my company. Richard has been removed from operational decisions, and James has been reassigned to our subsidiary in Minneapolis. I'd like to meet to discuss a new partnership, one that respects your ownership of the patents and your vision for Glucosync." I agreed to meet him the following day at a neutral location, a conference room at Amanda's law firm. When I arrived, Harold was already there, accompanied by a single lawyer, rather than the usual entourage of executives. He looked tired, but resolute. Before we discussed business, he began, "I want to apologize personally for what happened. I became too removed from day-to-day operations, too trusting of Richard's judgment. I failed to protect the innovative culture that built this company, and I failed you specifically." His apology seemed sincere, but I remained cautious. "Thank you, Harold. But apologies don't change the situation we're in." "No, they don't," he agreed, "which is why I'm here with a proposal that acknowledges the new reality." Harold's offer was unexpected. A joint venture between Huntington Biomedical and my new company, which didn't yet exist beyond Stephanie's hospital room planning sessions. Huntington would provide manufacturing infrastructure, distribution networks, and regulatory support, all the expensive, time-consuming elements needed to bring a medical device to market. In exchange, they would receive a non-exclusive license to produce and sell Glucosync, paying me substantial royalties. "You would maintain complete ownership of the patents," Harold emphasized, "and full control over future innovations based on the technology." We would be your partner, not your owner. It was a clever proposal. Harold knew that even with venture capital backing, I would struggle to build the infrastructure needed to manufacture and distribute Glucosync quickly. This approach would get the device to patients faster while still respecting my ownership. I'll need to think about it, I told him, and discuss it with my advisors. That evening, I presented both options to Stephanie and Amanda Bennett's venture capital offer versus Harold's joint venture proposal. Bennett offers independence but dilutes your control, Stephanie observed. Harold offers faster market entry but ties you to a company that's already betrayed you once. What about a third option, Amanda suggested? Use Harold's offer as leverage with Bennett. See if he'll match the resources without demanding as much equity. The negotiation that followed was intense. Bennett agreed to reduce his equity demand and provide additional resources for manufacturing. Harold improved his royalty terms and added protections against future management changes. Both men recognized the value of what I brought to the table, and neither wanted to lose the opportunity. In the end, I chose a hybrid approach, forming my own company with Bennett's backing, but entering a limited manufacturing and distribution agreement with Huntington Biomedical. This gave me the independence I wanted while leveraging Huntington's existing infrastructure to reach patients quickly. I named the company Chen Medical Technologies in honor of Stephanie. She insisted on serving as chairperson of the board despite her illness, bringing her considerable expertise and reputation to our fledgling enterprise. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. We established headquarters in a small office park, not far from Huntington Biomedical. Several key scientists from my old team joined me, eager to work in an environment that valued their contributions. We refined the Glucosync design, improving it beyond what had been possible under Huntington's cost-conscious management. When Stephanie's condition worsened, I set up a remote workstation in her hospital room so she could remain involved. Even as her body failed her, her mind remained sharp, her insights invaluable. Build something different, she urged during one of our late-night planning sessions. Not just a better product, but a better company. One where scientists are respected, where innovation isn't sacrificed for quarterly results, where patients come before profits. I took her words to heart. At Chen Medical Technologies, we established a corporate culture that celebrated collaboration and ethical innovation. Every employee, from lab technicians to administrative staff, received equity in the company. We created a patient advisory board to ensure those living with diabetes had input on product design and pricing strategy. 6 months after my firing, we launched an improved version of Glucosync. The device was smaller, more accurate, and more user-friendly than the version Huntington had planned to release. More importantly, we implemented a pricing strategy that made it accessible to more patients, including a subsidy program for those without adequate insurance coverage. The market response was overwhelming. Orders exceeded our production capacity within weeks, validating our decision to partner with Huntington for manufacturing. Harold kept his word, ensuring our agreement was honored, despite grumbling from his board about the generous royalty terms. As for Richard and James, their fall from grace was swift and public. Richard took early retirement 6 months after the patent incident, and James's temporary assignment to Minneapolis became permanent. Industry rumors suggested that Harold had amended the company bylaws to prevent either from returning to positions of authority. One unexpected outcome came 3 months after our product launch. Sarah Johnson, the HR director who had been present at my firing, reached out to request a meeting. I should have spoken up that day, she told me when we met for coffee. I knew what they were doing was wrong, both ethically and legally, but I was afraid for my job. I understood her position. Not everyone could afford to take the stand I had taken. I've resigned from Huntington, she continued. Their culture isn't going to change fundamentally even with Harold back in control. I was hoping Chen Medical might need an HR director who's learned the hard way about the importance of ethical leadership. Her candor impressed me. We needed someone who understood corporate HR systems but shared our values. Sarah joined our team the following month and quickly became an essential part of our leadership. As our company grew, I remained mindful of the lessons from my experience at Huntington. We expanded deliberately, prioritizing culture and values over rapid growth. When larger medical device companies approached with acquisition offers, we declined, preferring to maintain our independence and vision. Stephanie lived long enough to see the first sales figures and the initial patient testimonials before passing peacefully in her sleep. At her memorial service, I announced the establishment of the Stephanie Chen Foundation, dedicated to supporting women in medical science and engineering. The foundation would be funded by a percentage of every Glucosync sale, ensuring her legacy would continue alongside the technology we had created together. 1 year after my firing, Chen Medical Technologies was thriving. Our workforce had grown from 12 to over 100 employees. Glucosync had helped over 200,000 patients better manage their diabetes. And the technology that had almost been taken from me was now helping to change lives around the world exactly as I had always intended. 1 year and 3 months after that fateful day when James Huntington told me my paycheck was a courtesy, I found myself standing on a stage at the annual Medical Innovation Awards in Boston. Our improved Glucosync device had just been named Medical Device of the Year, and as CEO of Chen Medical Technologies, I was there to accept the award. Looking out at the audience, I spotted many familiar faces: Michael Bennett, whose firm had taken a chance on a scientist with no business experience; Amanda Davis, whose legal foresight had protected my life's work; Harold Huntington, whose late-stage integrity had helped salvage a difficult situation; and in the front row, an empty seat with a single white rose, a tribute to Stephanie Chen, whose vision and friendship had guided me through the darkest moments of this journey. This award honors innovation. I began my acceptance speech. But true innovation isn't just about technology. It's about purpose. It's about values. It's about the difference we make in people's lives. I shared the story of a 12-year-old girl who had written to me about how Glucosync had transformed her experience living with diabetes. No more painful finger pricks at school. No more anxious guessing about her blood sugar levels. No more feeling different from her friends. Her letter had ended simply, "Thank you for making me feel normal again." As I concluded my speech, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. Sometimes our greatest setbacks open doors to opportunities we never imagined. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find out what really matters. The standing ovation that followed was humbling, but the real satisfaction came later that evening at a small gathering of our core team. We weren't just celebrating an award, we were celebrating the culture we'd built together, the patients we'd helped, and the ethical foundation upon which we'd established our company. 2 months after the award ceremony, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at Huntington Biomedical's annual Innovation Summit. Harold was retiring and restructuring the company's leadership. He wanted me to address their research team about maintaining scientific integrity in a commercial environment. I accepted, seeing an opportunity to influence the culture of my former workplace. Walking into the Huntington building for the first time since my firing was surreal. Some faces were familiar, others new. The research wing had been renamed the Mary Wilson Innovation Center, Harold's parting gesture before retirement. My talk centered not on the patent dispute, but on the importance of building corporate cultures where scientists and business professionals collaborate with mutual respect, where short-term profit doesn't override long-term innovation, where ethical considerations are part of every decision. Afterward, a young researcher approached me. "Your story has been circulating among the science team," she said. "It's changed how we negotiate our contracts and how we stand up for our work. Thank you for fighting back." Her words reminded me that our actions create ripples beyond our immediate circumstances. By standing firm in that moment of crisis, I had potentially changed the experience of countless other scientists and innovators. The foundation, established in Stephanie's name, became another source of profound satisfaction. In its first year, the Stephanie Chen Foundation provided scholarships to 15 young women pursuing careers in medical technology. Each recipient reminded me of myself and Stephanie in our early days, brilliant, dedicated, and determined to make a difference. When one of the scholarship recipients joined Chen Medical Technologies as an intern, I made a point of mentoring her personally. Watching her confidence grow, as she contributed to our next-generation glucose monitoring system, I saw the continuation of a legacy that stretched from Stephanie to me, and now to the next generation. 6 months later, I received news that surprised the entire industry. Huntington Biomedical was being acquired by a larger medical device company. Harold had fully retired, and the board had accepted an offer that would integrate Huntington's products into a global healthcare corporation. Our joint venture agreement remained secure, protected by the careful legal language Amanda had insisted upon. But the acquisition marked the end of an era. The Huntington family would no longer control the company that bore their name. I thought often about Richard and James in the aftermath of our confrontation. Industry gossip suggested that James had eventually left Huntington Biomedical, entirely starting a small consultancy that struggled to gain traction. Richard had retired to Florida, his influence in the medical device industry diminished by the public nature of the patent dispute. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. The experience had taught me that vengeance offers only hollow victories. The real triumph was in building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal, creating a company that embodied the values I believed in. The most unexpected development came when Sarah Johnson, now our HR director, informed me that several former Huntington employees had applied for positions at Chen Medical. Among them was Dr. Robert Miller, the senior researcher, who had warned me about the Huntington's plans to restructure my department. "They're all excellent candidates," Sarah noted, "and they specifically want to work here because of our culture and leadership. We hired several of them, including Robert, who brought valuable expertise to our research team." During his first week, he shared something that put the entire ordeal into perspective. "The day after you were fired, he told me Richard and James called a meeting to reassure the research team. They said you had chosen to leave, that you'd been compensated generously for your contributions. But we knew better. When the patent reversion news broke, people actually applauded in the lab. Not because they wanted Huntington to fail, but because someone had finally stood up to the bullying and disrespect." His words reminded me that our actions have meaning beyond their immediate consequences. By refusing to be silenced by insisting on the value of my work, I had perhaps encouraged others to do the same. As Chen Medical Technologies continued to grow, I made certain decisions differently than Huntington would have. We reinvested heavily in research rather than maximizing short-term profits. We established a patient advisory board with real influence over product development. We implemented profit sharing for all employees, ensuring everyone benefited from our success. 2 years after my firing, Glucosync had helped over 1 million patients worldwide. We had expanded our product line to include other non-invasive monitoring tools, each built on the foundation of the technology I had nearly lost. Our company culture had become a case study at business schools, an example of how ethical leadership and scientific innovation could coexist and thrive. The journey from employee to entrepreneur had transformed me in ways I never expected. I had discovered strengths I didn't know. I possessed resilience in the face of betrayal, courage to stand up for my worth, vision to build something better than what I had lost. Perhaps the most profound lesson was one Stephanie had tried to teach me during those hospital room strategy sessions. Our greatest contributions often come not from what we create, but from how we create it. The values we embody, the examples we set, the people we mentor along the way. In the end, James Huntington had been right about one thing, though not in the way he intended. My paycheck had indeed been a courtesy, a poor substitute for the true value I brought to Huntington Biomedical. By firing me, he had inadvertently freed me to discover my full worth and potential. So if you're watching this and facing your own moment of betrayal or underappreciation, remember sometimes the end of one path reveals a better one you couldn't see before. Your value isn't determined by a paycheck or a title. It's determined by your own courage to stand up for what you've created and what you believe in. I'd love to hear your stories of professional challenges and how you overcame them. Have you ever had to stand up for your worth or walk away from a situation that didn't value you? Share in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about navigating the complex world of work and finding your true path. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your greatest setback might just be setting you up for something extraordinary.